Hello. It's a silvery day. And I've known of Christopher Isherwood as long as I've known of Auden because I used to see their collab books in the library a lot. It was good to take a break from reading some of the Samuel Beckett I've been reading and read something that's a little more, a little less internal. It actually has some of the world in it. It's not so, the characters aren't so hidden away inside their own skulls. Now here's a book I found in Chicago a while ago, and this is just a side note that would be really good to read probably for the channel. I bet there's some fans of Flann O'Brien out there. So I had a friend of mine who's a man who really loved this book, and I have a friend of mine who's a woman who started reading the book and admired it, but then found it too sad, kind of too sad to not kind of give up as soon as the going got insufferable, as it does in one scene, I think, in particular. Every time I would set this book down and like go get a glass of water, or go to the bathroom or something, I would always catch this word ballade, and I would remember this book on Chopin that I have that I want to read. And Chopin does have a kind of Isherwoody toughness to his cuteness, and he is thinking about a lot of stuff up there, and he kind of looks like a professor. I don't know. This is one of those Dover editions. It's not a Dover thrift edition, but it's like an actual Dover, the good stuff. Yeah, there's a lot about quavers in this book that I hope to get to soon. And then there's also this book by Benjamin Britten that was right beside it on the shelf that I feel like might be a better read before Chopin, because honestly, I have more experience singing Britten's stuff than I do playing any of Chopin's, A lot of people did Chopin when I was younger. Take a breath. A lot of people did Chopin when I was younger, and I never really, kind of wanted to learn those pieces. I think they were, of course, too difficult for me, but they were also... I don't know. They didn't trot like I wanted. They were too silky. Last thing I'll say is that my little collection of 33 1/3 books was right beside these on the shelf as well. There was also a copy of Villette there, which, is that a good book? I should probably read that. I actually got rid of a 33 1/3 book today. It was the Celine Dion one that's about bad taste. I'd known about this book ever since I saw a copy of the movie edition with Colin Firth. Wait. The movie edition with Colin Firth's face on the cover that's out there somewhere. I remember thinking that it is kind of like a movie, the way this little tiny book opens up, and the first thing you see is Picador Modern Classics presents, and then you get some stuff. I must say that while I was Googling stuff about Isherwood after reading this, I became most excited about trying to find a copy of the Memorial, and then I went to the library and saw it and didn't check it out. Now, why is that? Another thing that you bookphiles would like to know, a bookphile like me would like to know, is that they describe this kind of binding as paper over board, the binding of this little pretty book. The only note I ever took in the book was a little thing about how these syllables am and now are like two other syllables brought up by one of the main characters, maybe the second most important character in the book, in a conversation that happens in the middle of the book. This is a very true book about driving. Driving makes you feel like you can live, like you can function, like you're a part of society, and everything's going your way, and you can, whatever. You can work it. You can work these roads. But it also makes you feel like a murderous lunatic, and it makes you feel like you're, funneling down into an awful political spot where you're Uncle George. This book reminded me of a couple of others. First, you got Dostoevsky. You gotta love these cool editions published by Raduga Publishers, Moscow. I think that these are sick men and spiteful men, and they're grieving men, Grieving. I think it's my liver. I think it's my atheromatous plaque. There's a subtlety to the ending of this book that I think went lost on me, actually, as I was finishing the book. And when I closed it, I was like, that was great, but I also said I didn't really like the ending. I think what I should have said is that I didn't like the feeling like the novel, for the sake of good form, was obligated to have these characters through lines throughout the day. I thought that basically, it's cool that Kenneth shows back up and it's like a climax for the novel, but it's kind of unbelievable. It almost kind of feels like a hypothetical that's tacked onto the end of the day, kind of like the ending is tacked on hypothetically. The contrast to that is that I thought that Charlotte was very organically worked in, and I thought that the kind of, deciding to go back and see her is was a really endearing part of the novel. Now, when it came time for Doris, whose eyes are a wild, brilliant blue in her sick yellow face, that was my part in the novel where I was like, if I was going to tap out anywhere, it would be here. But there's a kind of honesty here that reminds you of, I guess, whatever honesty Jean-Paul Sartre sees in Georges Bataille's Story of the Eye. I mean, I was also constantly reminded of The Catcher in the Rye. You know, there are people who read A Single Man and they're like, oh, he's bitchy or something, but really, I mean, he's grieving. And you know what? They should maybe talk about maybe what Holden Caulfield's grieving or what he's soon to grieve. I mean, he talks a lot about what he grieves in the novel. Coming from Beckett, who is like kind of fussy sounding about the sentences. Of course, all the sentences are perfect, but I think they're fussy. Coming back down to A Single Man felt almost like a drop in register from, you know, something real like Henry James to Salinger or something. I don't know. I've been thinking a heck of a lot about Henry James lately, but not actually reading that much of it. Sometimes I feel like I carry around in my head just a parody of Henry James. And just like that, we're back to the moat in the middle distance. I really do feel like Max Beerbohm is like what I imagine Christopher Isherwood to have been like as a young person. I wonder if there's something of that, like, that intelligence that's so high that when it trains itself on anything, it feels like it wants to just dismantle the thing, like explode it immediately, like almost like it hates the thing and wants to bomb it away. Keep in mind, this is coming from a guy who's like never read any of this guy, Max Beerbohm, really. And this is an unusual example because I don't know how many of Christopher Isherwood's novels deal with like grief and the anger that grief causes. I mean, this novel reminds you of so many people and so much. You know, there's also that novel, A Meeting by the River by Isherwood that came out in like 1967 that I think is also grieving from the perspective of, I think, siblings, like mutual grieving for each other. Sound off in the comments if that's a real misrepresentation, but I saw that at the library today, and I was much more tempted to pick up that than I was the memorial. If I don't want smart authors to bomb things with their intellect, then maybe I should wear a ban the bomb button. The classroom scene in here is one of the most pleasurable parts of the whole novel because it feels so real. I mean, it's like that moment where he decides to call Charlotte back up. Those things that are so true. And I think pleasure in this novel comes from its truth, comes from its honesty. So anyway, I feel like guys like this are all the same, you know, just because I'm a simple-minded guy. In a certain sense, I'm like that piece in here where Henry James reviews Walt Whitman, except I'm Walt Whitman reviewing Henry James. And I'm getting my genres all mixed up, like acting like I know a thing or two about the novel when really all I know a thing or two about is the song that's like cut in half so that it only has the verse and the chorus and then it stops and there's like static because that's art. Because when Henry James talks about Walt Whitman, he's like trying to say things that poetry should do, but they're clearly just things that a novel should do, Henry James thinks. It gives you more insight into what he actually thinks a novelist should do. And what a novelist should do is like a lot of what you think about when you're reading A Single Man because it just feels so well crafted. But it also kind of feels like it's trying to blow itself up with its own grief and anger. In that sense, in that way, it kind of feels more like a man or some Notes from Underground or whatever. While I'm on the Salinger kick, there's also kind of a thing about Franny, about somebody trying to function and failing to, like trying to function, having a lot to say, trying to say it to people. Sometimes feeling like they succeed, sometimes feeling like they're okay just giving up and not saying, but then at the end of the book, just basically passing out. I mean, which is what happens with any novel that takes place over 24 hours and begins in the morning. You know that Franny, with the skill of a novice, slowly puts on the psychological makeup for the role she must play. Of course, please argue with me about all this. This was basically just a video to say that I finally read A Single Man, after a long time knowing that I should read it and like not reading it. It was beautiful. I really enjoyed it. And I was in awe of the prose, especially as a guy who tends to read a lot of flashy crap. Not that there's anything wrong with flashy crap. I love the heck out of some flashy crap. It's really good when you're stimulated, when you got the caffeine going, and when you feel like you got some time in the day, not when it's like dusk like this. I feel like dusk is no time for experimentalism. And also, yeah, I did really like reading it in this edition. The printing was so good. I only found one typo where the word is was it. So I don't know if anyone from Picador wants to fix that. I think the book's pretty fine. The print was so clear that it kind of looked like there was a little shadow under it. The entire book's about 215 pages long. 200 and, can we focus here? 214 pages long. And there's kind of a silvery sheen to the book itself. That's, again, paper over board. So I highly recommend the book, highly recommend the edition, and I think next time I get one of these Picador Modern Classics things, I think I might get Housekeeping, because that's always been a book I have misunderstood. Everybody have a good evening.